Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program, Get Criminal Mischief here. It's also on our podcast series. I'm your host, DP Lyle. We have a great guest for you today. Teresa Devitt-Lynch is a multi-talented person, and she's got some stuff to talk about that are going to be interesting to all of our criminal mischief viewers and listeners. Uh, she's an RN for over 25 years. She also has a master's degree in nursing, which takes her a level up. She's a U.S. Naval veteran and has experience in military nursing. So you can see she's got a very broad reach. But there's another thing. She's also carries a board certification in advanced forensic nursing. Wow. She also is the founder and CEO of INTREPID Forensic Healthcare Consulting. We'll talk about that a little bit. We've all heard, especially the listeners here, have all heard about the word forensic. You can't walk around the corner without it hitting you in the face. You know about forensic pathologists and forensic toxicology and forensic science, and it turns up everywhere all the time. But how many of you really know about forensic nursing and what a forensic nurse does? So hopefully we're going to find out more about that today. Teresa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your upbringing and schooling and all that, and what led you into nursing?
Well, I was born and raised in North Dakota. Um, and then, when I graduated high school, I just knew for whatever reason the military was my calling. And so then I got a scholarship for nursing and went through that. I had wanted to be a forensic profiler. I don't know if you know Ann Burgess. She's a forensic nurse as well. She's a forensic profiler.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
I had wanted, but I was locked into the nursing scholarship. So that was kind of out the window. Um, and so, I started looking into other things that I could do in forensics and nursing. And it wasn't till I hit my fourth or fifth duty station in the military that I found sexual assault nurse examinations. So, and this is when I was in Portsmouth, Virginia. I had been to 29 Palms, California. I had been to Okinawa, Japan. I had been to Great Lakes as an instructor. I had been to, and then I had been to Portsmouth, and that's where I found forensic nursing. So I took the course, and for whatever reason, they thought I would be a good addition to the Portsmouth didn't have a program at the time. So me and one other experienced SANE sexual assault nurse examiner, we stood up that program at Portsmouth. And I don't know if people know about Portsmouth, but it's either the first or second largest military hospital in the Navy anyway. So we had a big job. And the first day that we opened, we had 3 patients. So it was definitely a needed service there. So then from there, I became the lead trainer and helped her train other nurse examiners. And then I went off to Sigonella, Italy. And that's where I started consulting. In Sigonella, Italy, I think I was there from 2012 to 2015. And in Sigonella, Italy, there was no, out of all of the branches, there was no certified sexual assault nurse examiner. So for all the court martials, I got called to be a consultant, which was a whole different world from doing the examination. So, and that's the part of forensic nursing that I absolutely fell in love with, was being in the courtroom, evaluating the cases, looking at all different angles of the cases, not just doing the examination. I still enjoyed doing the examination, but the courtroom was really where I wanted to be. Now, my master's degree in nursing is in education and training. And this is going to sound like a whole roundabout story. My master's in nursing is in education and training. So not only was I doing the examinations, consulting on criminal cases, but I was also traveling the world, the military world anyway, and teaching how to do these exams. So I've taught in Bahrain, I've taught in Italy, I've taught in the US, I've taught in Spain, I've taught military people how to do these exams all over the place. So we've got the education piece of it, we've got the examination piece of it, and then we've got the consulting. So then I moved to San Antonio, Texas, where the main education and training office was for the Navy. That's also where the multi-service unit was for training sexual assault forensic examiners. So then I got detailed over to that office where I helped to finish up the curriculum and then start the tri-service. So we trained Army, Navy, Air Force, healthcare providers on how to do these examinations. And at this point, I was a year out from retiring. And so then when I retired in March of 2017, that's when I started Intrepid. I wanted to continue consulting. And then I also did a year in a civilian hospital doing sexual assault forensic examinations. And let me tell you, there's a big difference between doing them in civilian hospitals and doing them in military hospitals. So then, since 2012 or 2013, I've been consulting. I worked a year at that civilian hospital and then I stopped working there so that I could focus on consulting. And that's what I've been doing since 2013.
So what is the major difference between a civilian examination and a military examination? I mean, is it paperwork and scrutiny, or what is it? What's the difference?
It's well, the paperwork, yes. The military has one form that goes all across all the militaries. Civilian hospital, the form was different, so I had to get used to that. Some of the processes were slightly different, so I had to get used to those. And then working with law enforcement. There in the military, the sexual assault examiner determined whether an exam would be done or not. In the civilian sector, because we didn't have to worry about money. That was one thing but in the civilian sector, that was one thing we took for granted, actually, was that we didn't have to worry about money. But in the civilian sector, somebody has to pay for the examinations. So you had to get authorization from law enforcement, which was probably one of the biggest changes that I had to get used to was getting that authorization from law enforcement to have the examination done, especially on certain patients where they maybe didn't necessarily think the exam was warranted.
Right. What about chain of custody when you do the exam? How does that differ between the military and civilian? I mean, I've done them in the emergency room. I've done sexual assault exams as a physician, so I understand how it works. But was the cop standing there and take the package from you when you're finished with it? And was that your experience also? Because mine's way, way, way many years old. And how did that differ in the military, or was there a difference?
There really wasn't a difference. Either the cop would be there and we would turn it over right away, or you would have a two-level storage unit that you would store it into until they came and got it. And that was pretty much the same. And the only difference was the chain of custody forms, but they all included the same information, just a different format.
So then they would haul you into court, as it were, to testify and all of this.
Yeah.
Were they was most of that just discussing how the test was done, how the samples were collected, chain of custody, that kind of thing? Or were you also asked opinion about physical examination and historical examination of the victim?
Well, that depended what was needed for, that was a trial strategy. decision really by the attorneys. If
Okay.
I was the one that did the examination, I could either describe what I did or testify as a fact witness where I would not give opinion. Or if they wanted an opinion on something and I was qualified, then I would test. And let me tell you, the very first time I testified, I was qualified as an expert witness. So I almost crapped my pants, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I was qualified as an expert witness, then I could give an opinion. But now that I'm consulting, I'm always an expert witness and
But do
providing
you
the
address like trauma that you see and the things that go on? We don't want to get too graphic here, but the things that are often found in rape cases, do you testify to that, or is it mainly about the test itself?
It depends. If I find deviations from how the test was done, I will provide, how the standard test is done because the Department of Justice has a guideline on
Mm,
how to do these examinations.
sure.
And that is the basis that states and local facilities base um, their local protocols on. And so if I find a deviation, then I talk about that deviation, but I also talk about the injuries that are not found based on the history. So it's the history of the assault that guides what evidence you should be collecting and also what injuries that you should be looking for. So if somebody says they were punched in the face with a fist very hard 3 times in a row, and there's no redness, there's no swelling, well, then in my expert opinion, I would say chances are they were not punched in the face. And that's another thing actually I'd like to bring up. There are very few, other than at some point we die, there are very few absolutes in medicine, and that's also in sexual assault
Absolutely.
examinations.
Well, as a matter of fact, I remember from the old days, again, I practiced cardiology for 50 years, so I'm so far removed from all of that. But back then, one of the first things that I had to testify in a couple of rape cases because I did the exam. And so we would bring into court, what'd you do? And is this the sample? Is this your the usual BS. Um, but one of the things that they told us right up front is that rape is not a medical diagnosis. So you cannot
Correct.
use that term. You can say trauma, you can say about the sample you took, you can say what you saw, what you found, what history you took, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you cannot use the term rape. It's not a medical term. And they will
Yeah.
try to trick you, as you well know. I'm sure that they've done
Yes.
that. In your opinion, do you think, I don't have an opinion on that because that's not a medical diagnosis. But if you're going to ask me this or this or this, I'll answer the question for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of people don't understand that.
There's two things that a sexual assault examination cannot determine. And like you said, rape is one of them. That's a legal term, not a medical term, but also the veracity of the allegations.
Right.
We don't know how truthful the patient is. If, we assume as healthcare providers, because we walk a fine line between healthcare and the legal system.
Right.
So, as healthcare providers, we believe them in that they've experienced some sort of trauma. But do we necessarily believe every patient that comes in and tells their story? That's not necessarily, we use it to guide the injury where we think injury might be found and where the evidence is going to be collected. But do patients lie? Even regular patients that go to an orthopedist, do they lie that go to the ER? Do they lie? Yes, for a variety of reasons. Patients
Exactly.
may not tell the truth or leave out information. And it's the same thing with SANE examinations. And I'm by no means saying that they all lie, but I am saying that it does happen, or they might inadvertently leave out information, or they might, because of the trauma that happens, it does affect the formation of memory and the ordering of memory. So they may not get the story in the right order. And so maybe they're not lying, but it's hard for them to collect their thoughts and give coherent thoughts. But that is another thing that the sexual assault examination cannot determine, is the veracity of the history of the assault.
And that's very difficult. It's what makes these types of situations so difficult to adjudicate because,
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's he said, she said, unless there's physical evidence to the contrary. But also, everybody has a different story. And when you're traumatized, say a car accident, people say, well, you were standing beside the car. How did you get out of the car? I don't remember. Did you
Right.
did you undo your seatbelt yourself or did it come undone? I don't remember, because you don't remember that. I do remember the windshield flying away in one piece and shattering on the road. I can see that, but I don't know how I got out of the car. So
Yeah.
your memory plays tricks on you. And it's the same way, any traumatic situation. That's true. That's just life. That's just human. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. So you're consulting for how would, so who consults you? Who would call your firm and say, we need your opinion. We need your expertise.
So I still consult with the military. I consult in civilian criminal cases and I consult with the military. When I consult with the military, I'm probably almost 50-50 prosecution and defense.
Mhm.
But for the civilian sector, I'm 100% defense. And that's not because I don't offer my services to the prosecution. They just usually use either the
Sure.
medical examiner or the person who performed the sexual assault examination. That's
Exactly.
the only reason. Because neutrality is one of the key points in being a consultant. You have to be willing to consult for both, the prosecution and the defense, because my job is not to win the case. I'll be honest, how the case turns out is not of my concern.
Right.
My job is to educate the attorney, give him the information that he needs to provide a zealous prosecution or defense. And then when I testify, my job is to educate the jury so that they have the information, the trier of fact, even the judge, so that they have the information they need to make a sound decision as to guilty or not guilty.
And it's different, as you well know, whether you are there as a witness to testify on something, whatever it is, a car accident you witnessed or whatever, but as an expert witness, you're allowed to give opinions and you're allowed to educate the jury, whereas a regular witness, if you will, is not. I've done probably 100 expert witness things in my career. Uh, it's a different animal, and it does allow you a lot more leeway, but it also piles on a lot more responsibility. But you still have to be unbiased and honest and take, this is what I saw, this is what I determined, this is what I believe, this is my opinion. End of
Exactly.
story. End of story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wow. What a career you've had. This is great. So your website is intrepidfhc.com,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yep.
If anybody wants to look you up and grab your services or just chit chat, send you a note and say, we like talking
Yep.
to you. Um, is there anything else that you think people should know about forensic nursing that we haven't talked about? Any other issues or any other things you think are important?
No, I just think, it's a niche of nursing that, number one, there's not enough of,
Right.
especially in rural areas. And it's a fascinating world that I wish more people knew about. So people can find me on my website or just Google me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk further. If anybody
Well,
has any ideas they want to run by me on what a forensic nurse would do in a story or something like that, very happy to continue the conversation.
well, there you go. Any of you out there who are looking for that place to drop your anchor, you're in high school or maybe even earlier, or you're in college or you're out of college working and you say, I want to do something else. This could be an interesting career for you. And it is
Yeah.
medical, it is science, it is legal. It wears a lot of hats, and it's a good career. So
It
I
is.
recommend it. Teresa, thank you so much. It's been just wonderful having you here, and I think you've really spotlighted some things that that people need to know. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I was happy to come on.
All right. Well, that wraps up this episode of Criminal Mischief here on the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series. And as you know, we will be back with more shows down the road. So until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun, and try not to get caught.